Okay, so picture this. There's a book written way back in 1966 that lays out in really terrifying detail exactly how the world is going to end. But here's the kicker. Before almost anyone could read it, the CIA swoops in, grabs it, and classifies the whole thing. For nearly 60 years, it was basically hidden from public view. It sounds like a movie plot, right? But this is the bizarre and totally true story of a book called The Adam and Eve Story. And I mean, just listen to this one line from the very first chapter. It just sets this incredibly chilling tone, right? The guy who wrote it, Chan Thomas, he wasn't trying to write some sci-fi novel. No, he truly believed he was describing a real, cyclical, world-ending event, something that he thought wasn't just possible, but was absolutely 100% inevitable. So that's the big question, isn't it? That's the mystery we're really going to dig into here. Why on earth would the CIA classify a book that's predicting the end of the world? Was there something in it that was so dangerous, so, I don't know, so packed with forbidden knowledge that it just had to be hidden away? Or is the real story something even weirder? All right, let's get into it. Because behind all the internet hype and the mystery, there's a real guy and a very, very strange but very real book. So, the author's name was Dr. Chan Thomas. And this guy wasn't some crackpot writing from his basement. He was a legitimate engineer who worked for huge companies like McDonnell Douglas. This wasn't just some weekend project for him. His book laid out this incredibly detailed, scientific-sounding theory for how the world just periodically hits the reset button. And when I say detailed, I mean his theory was, well, it was huge. He was claiming that these world-ending disasters aren't just random acts of nature. Nope. He said they're part of a predictable, repeating cycle. And get this, he believed that our civilization, we're just the latest in a long, long line. He thought there were others before us on these lost continents like Atlantis and Mu that were just completely, utterly wiped from the history books. But it gets even crazier because Thomas didn't just talk about what would happen. He went into terrifying step-by-step detail about how it would all go down. Okay, so according to Thomas, it all starts with this weird, silent rumble, and then just erupts into total chaos. The idea is that the Earth's crust suddenly stops spinning, but the air and the oceans, they keep going. And that creates these 1,000-mile-an-hour winds that just shred everything, followed by 2-mile-high walls of water that swallow entire continents. Then the crust itself cracks open, unleashing oceans of lava. And to top it all off, one half of the planet flash freezes while the other half just bakes. I mean, it is literally the most intense disaster movie you could ever imagine. And to try and back all this up, he pointed to what he called a timeline of destruction. He tried to link his whole theory to real geological events we know about, things like the end of the last ice age or those great flood myths that you find in pretty much every single ancient culture around the world. He was basically saying, hey, look, the evidence for these resets is hidden right there in our own history. So, okay, that's the story. It's a wild one. The big question is, how much of it is actually true? Let's try and separate the internet legend from what the declassified documents actually say. Okay, so here's myth number 1 you'll see all over the internet, that the original book was this huge 284-page monster, and the CIA censored most of it, only letting 57 pages out. The reality? The book was always just 57 pages long. That's it. We have the whole thing. And the CIA didn't ban it from existence. They just classified the one single copy that somehow ended up on their desk. And you want to know what else was in that top secret classified file right alongside this apocalyptic book? Well, there was an interoffice memo, a folded-up article from People magazine, and, wait for it, a shopping list. I'm not kidding. A shopping list for tools and car parts was officially classified by the Central Intelligence Agency. The most likely explanation here is pretty mundane, actually. It was probably all just scooped up as part of a routine background check on Dr. Thomas, who, you have to remember, worked on some pretty sensitive government missile projects. So what about the actual science behind the theory? Well, it turns out Thomas's big idea wasn't even his. He pretty much lifted it from another guy, a theorist named Charles Hapgood. But here's the fatal flaw in that plan. Hapgood himself, after working with big-name scientists like Albert Einstein, actually came out later and said, you know what? My original theory was wrong. He published a whole new book correcting himself. Thomas? He just kind of ignored that part and ran with the original, totally disproven version. And this is where the story takes another weird turn. Even though his main theory is basically pseudoscience, some of the specific things Thomas talked about, well, he wasn't entirely wrong about them. He just had the wrong why. So, for example, he talked about global floods. And guess what? We know for a fact massive floods did happen around the end of the last ice age, just from melting glaciers. He talked about flash-frozen mammoths. And yep, we've actually found woolly mammoths frozen solid so fast that they still have undigested food in their stomachs, which points to some kind of sudden, catastrophic event. And amazingly, he was even right that the Earth's axis can physically shift. Now, it's not the gigantic world-ending lurch he was describing, not even close. But NASA actually confirmed that the massive 2004 earthquake in Indonesia was so powerful that it physically moved the North Pole by about 25 centimeters. So that little tiny kernel of his idea, it was actually, surprisingly, true. And that actually brings us perfectly from the pseudoscience of a physical pole shift to something that is very real, that is backed by tons of science, and that's happening as we speak. I'm talking about a shift, not of the ground beneath our feet, but of the Earth's magnetic poles. Okay, so let's be super clear about this because it's important. What Thomas was talking about, the entire crust of the Earth sliding around in a single day, that's been completely disproven. The scientific reality is what's called a magnetic pole reversal. This is where the planet's invisible magnetic field flips, and it happens really slowly, over thousands of years. And we know for sure this happens. It's happened hundreds of times, and the evidence is literally baked into ancient lava flows. Now, the last time one of these magnetic reversals happened was about 780,000 years ago. All right, just hold on to that number for a second. Because get this, the average time between these flips is only about 300,000 years. So yeah, you do the math. From a geological point of view, we are way, way overdue for the next one. And you know, there are some weird signs that maybe, just maybe, it's starting. Back in the 1990s, the magnetic North Pole was wandering at about 9 miles a year. Today, that speed has jumped to almost 40 miles a year. On top of that, the Earth's entire magnetic field is getting weaker, which is another huge sign scientists look for when a reversal might be on the horizon. Now, the real danger here isn't the flip itself. I mean, our ancient ancestors lived through these things just fine. The problem is us. The danger is that during that long transition period, our planet's protective magnetic shield gets super weak. And without that shield at full strength, a big solar storm, a coronal mass ejection, could be catastrophic. It could fry our satellites, take down global power grids, and mess with all modern navigation. Basically, our entire high-tech civilization is incredibly vulnerable to this. So in the end, Chan Thomas's wild apocalyptic story was way more fantasy than it was fact. But he did accidentally stumble onto some pretty uncomfortable truths, didn't he? And it kind of makes you wonder. I mean, theories we take for granted now, like continental drift, were once laughed at as complete pseudoscience. So what ideas are we all dismissing today that might just turn out to be the scientific facts of tomorrow?